Hi there, welcome back to another Drive and Talk with me, Ren. And in this video I want to talk about the importance of detachment in a relationship. Now, detachment is not something that you would probably think about when you think about healthy relationships, but let me explain. Okay, so in any relationship there should be some important factors that are there, right, between two people. Connection, physical attraction, emotional attraction, or basically what we call chemistry, right? So there are some other practical issues like, things like, does he or she live far away? Does she like dogs, children, etc. But I think those three are the main ones, right? Or in general, what we call chemistry, right? There should be chemistry. And I think the best relationships start out with all of those three, right? Because if you're physically attracted and there is connection, maybe physically but not emotionally, right? Then then the relationship is strong but not super strong, and eventually you will somehow in some way have some issues with that chemistry, right? Because I think when those three are 100% evident, then it's going to be better. But how does detachment come into all this? Well, I think, and many others think, that if you become too attached to one another, eventually you will lose yourself and you will start to become more and more like the other person. That's why sometimes people say about a couple that's been together for very long, like they look like brother and sister, and you know exactly what I mean, right? That's because they become too attached to each other. They become almost like one another, and that is not a good thing. When you can practice detachment, which is the opposite of attachment, and really implement that in a relationship, it will make the relationship so much stronger. Now, a lot of times the word detachment in a relationship is confused with independence, which is a part of it, right? When there are two people in a relationship and they're both independent, meaning they have their own jobs, they have their own friends, they have their own hobbies, it helps because they both have their own lives. And when they get together, they do the things together. They also probably have friends together. They go to family stuff. But they also each has their own life. Now, you don't have to be a relationship coach to know and to understand that that's a very good thing, right? Because you are not your partner, and your partner is not you. And that should never be the case. So in that light, I think you can understand where we're going with the detachment thing. But this is like independence. You both living independent lives, but you're also together. It's like independent connectivity, right? And that makes relationships strong. If you look at very strong relationships, those are sometimes very different people, but they're also very independent. They both have their own lives, they both have their own careers, or maybe their own businesses, and they're completely different, independent persons, but together they become a super powerful team. Now we can take this independence one step further, and then we get to detachment or non-attachment. It's actually nothing new. The old Stoic philosophers talked about this a long time ago. It basically means that you don't attach yourself to another person. It also means, if you take it a step further, that you don't attach yourself to anything, basically. Especially not material things, because they absolutely mean nothing, right? Like to your status, to your house, to your car, right? To things like this watch or these clothes, because they actually don't mean anything. And if I would lose them tomorrow, it would literally mean nothing to me, like nothing, right? And that is something that you can practice, that you can be grateful for all the things you have, but that you are not attached to them. That is, in essence, in short, in a nutshell, what detachment is. Now, on an emotional level, when we're talking about humans, this becomes more complicated. So when you're in a relationship, and ideally you would have independent lives but are still a super strong team, right? If you are not attached to the relationship with that person, then it would also mean that you will not do anything and everything to keep that relationship alive. Now, before you say like, well, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, bear with me for a moment. People change. That's one. And sometimes, even if you've been in a relationship for very long, I've known people for many decades and then found out that they're completely somebody else. So you might not know somebody as good as you think you are. And life just gets in the way, right? So people are sometimes forced to change, right? Or circumstances change, and therefore a relationship changes. But if you're too attached to this person, the relationship to that person, or the concept of or construct of that relationship, of especially what you think it should be, right? Then you will try to do anything and everything to keep that relationship alive, while in essence it shouldn't be, right? And you see this a lot. I've been there too. That's why I make this video, because I know what I'm talking about, because I literally lived it, right? So when me and my ex-partner, we've been together for almost 3 decades, but you know, we changed. We both changed, and there's no hard feelings, but we both changed, right? To a point where we weren't really interested in what the other was doing, right? But we were so invested and attached to this family unit construct, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also found out, for me personally, that I changed myself in some ways, so did my partner, to fit into that construct of that relationship. You understand? If I practiced detachment more, or we were more aware of the fact that that even exists or is a thing, then that would have ended earlier. And that is also important when it comes to detachment, right? Because when somebody says the relationship ends, or we have to end the relationship, as a gut feeling, you know, you think that's a bad thing, that's a negative thing, right? Because the word ending, break up, or to end, has a negative feeling to it. But if you're not attached to that construct, or to that relationship, or to that person in a way that is so extreme that you change yourself, you change your friends, you change your outlook on things just to stay in that construct, then it becomes something that lasts too long. Now, I'm not saying you should give up easy, that's not the point, right? The point here is that if you practice detachment, then it will be easier for you to take a step back and look at the situation with less emotion and less attachment, right? And with more common sense. Because that's what detachment really does, right? It creates space between the situation and yourself, right? You are not the situation itself, but you create distance between the situation and yourself. That is what attachment does. That is what detachment does, right? Because if you're attached to the things you own, you become the things you own. You know, I am the businessman. I am this or that. And with detachment, you create distance or space between the thing and yourself. So you can look at it more objectively. So in a relationship, detachment will help you create space between the relationship, between the person, the construct of that relationship, and all the things surrounding it, what friends think, what your parents think, etc., and you. So you can have a better, more realistic view of the situation, and you will not really go over the top by changing yourself, trying to change your partner, which I've also tried to do, which is completely stupid because people don't change when you want to. Again, I'm talking from experience. If you have more detachment, if you can create more space between you and your partner, you and the relationship with your partner, and you and the construct of that relationship, it will just help you make better decisions faster. Now, this has nothing to do with fighting for your relationship and being a good partner and having a strong relationship and really looking at all of the things all of the obstacles that come with relationships, all of the friction. But I really do think, and of course I'm not the only one, I'm not smart enough to think about all of this myself. So if you create more space between you and that person, you and the relationship, it will just help you make smarter decisions faster, and you will save yourself years. But even more, you will also save yourself, but also your partner and maybe your children, years of their life, and get to a better situation faster. I hope this was helpful. If it is, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, let me know too, and I will do my best to answer them.